stuff like that. When they talk to the vendors, they like
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome everyone to the second meeting of the Budget Evaluation Committee. Just to let everyone know, this is being broadcast live to the viewers at home. Local cable station. It's come to my attention that there may have been a slight issue with not everyone being sworn in enough time for the first meeting, so we do need to go through a quick reorganization just to follow some protocol.
I'll nominate Mr. Lambiasi for chairman.
Second.
I mean, I'm Mr. Lambiasi.
As long as it's not me.
That worked well, that worked well.
I'm with you.
Shaking it up there.
Want to make that motion again?
Just like we rehearsed.
Nominate Mr. Lambitina for chairman.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Nomination for vice chair. I'll nominate Mr. Lambiasi vice
Second.
chair. All those in favor?
Aye.
Uh-oh, somebody doesn't have the mic on.
All right. Clerk, I'll take a nomination for clerk, please.
Mr. Lyman. Second.
Does anyone else?
It's such a great job. These
This is
great.
amazing. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's all we did, right?
That's it.
Yes.
All right. All right, public forum. Anyone public here to speak? Okay. We'll go with a quick chairman's report. First thing on the agenda is the school funding formula, or assessment, or however anyone would like to describe it. It's my belief that we may have a discrepancy that needs to be looked into, that could play a critical part in where we stand, our evaluation ends up lying. I know Ms. Byers is somewhat versed on this. If you want to give a quick overview of this, and then I'll move to you.
Sure. The way assessments have been presented by the district in the past is with what's called an alternative assessment method, and it's based on our regional agreement, and it's by the enrollment count of the previous fiscal year, October 1st. So typically our enrollments between Whitman and Hanson are 60% Whitman students and 40% Hanson students, give or take a fraction of a percent. And after the budget and the state aid, Chapter 70 is deducted from the budget, there is an assessment to the town. So it is then divided by that enrollment, and that's how our district has been presenting that. There is also an option called the statutory method. It's referenced in some areas as a two-step method. Two-step meaning DESE and the state determines each town across Massachusetts has what's called a minimum local contribution. There are certain demographic factors that go into that minimum local contribution. It is by the two-step method. You take your total assessment that you're going to assess to both member towns, and you take that minimum local contribution piece. Subtract that for Whitman, subtract that for Hanson. You then have a remaining piece of assessment. You then refer to your regional agreement, and you go by your 64 to add that number back to each town.
So that would be to ensure that each town is receiving its proper allocation of Chapter 70 money or along those lines?
I can't speak to that. It's again, it's based on minimum local contribution. I know that the Mass Regional Association of Regional Schools has field representatives. Dayton Rehoboth is going through, still finalizing their fiscal year 20 budget. There is a field rep from Mass Regional Schools who has worked with Dayton Rehoboth just the last week or two. She's presented slides, data, information to Dayton Rehoboth on their minimum local contribution, how that is determined, those specific numbers to those towns. Maybe that's something we talk about if we want to look at Whitman and Hanson, when we refer to this minimum local contribution that each town should be contributing to the schools first, and then we look at the enrollments after that. So I think that's an option. Use as many resources as we can. But again, right now, the way the district has been assessing is based on the regional agreement that is currently in place, and it's split 60-40 based on population. So you're essentially valuing each student, Whitman and Hanson across the board, like the same dollar amount. You're just dividing the enrollment and the total pupils.
So based upon the past month and a half of digging into this statutory versus alternative method, contacting our attorney, who every attorney's on vacation in the summer, and MARS, which Dawn just referenced, the Mass Association of Regional Schools, we have been currently using the alternative method since 1991. In 2007, DESE issued a directive, or a memo, so to speak, to superintendents regarding the statutory method, which then took into account the minimum contribution per town and an alternative assessment. We stayed with the alternative assessment. In the new agreement, from what I'm reading, there's conflict in the new agreement, but the new agreement, as far as the funding formula, looks like we would be going to the statutory method, if you were to say that. So the new agreement, which was passed by school committee in June of 18 and passed by the town of Hanson in November of 18 and passed over in Whitman in 19, looks like the statutory method would be the method of funding moving forward, if that were to pass in the town of Hanson, or in the town of Whitman moving forward, which would then look into that minimum contribution per town and not take everything as equal. Back in 91, as far as we know, that was prior to, I just got out of college at that point, there was no minimum contribution. It was just set at a tone, so at a spot. I think in 2006 or 7, and Fred and I actually had this conversation today, we don't know when, but DESE started playing around with this minimum contribution. And that's when the memo came out, and I don't know if it was ever discussed at a school committee meeting. I don't know if Dr. McEwen ever brought that up. Or as Dawn and I talked about, maybe things were such an unequal spot in Hanson and Whitman at that time that nobody ever thought about it. Looking at it in the conversations, I know Mr. George was on the agreement committee, Fred was on the agreement committee, that discussion was brought up, and it looks like in that modified or amended agreement of 18, the district starts looking at the statutory method, which brings in the minimum contribution per town. So that would have an impact if that was the agreement moving forward for fiscal 21. I actually have a meeting with representatives from Hanson tomorrow to talk about that, and I believe the accountant has an idea that if we were to move into the statutory method, and I can't, that's just a conversation we had off the cuff, that they know that there would be an impact potentially to the town of Hanson and to the town of Whitman.
Right, and just to avoid confusion, I think numbers have been kicked around in the past, but I would like to avoid any numbers right now until we actually...
And I would be very uncomfortable giving any numbers because nothing's been approved and it's all speculation right now, as it is. And we're still with the old agreement.
Like I said, the only reason why I brought it up on the agenda is I just feel that it will have an impact of what we ultimately ask for.
One of the things too that Dawn brought to our attention, and we looked into it from Mars, is looking at, and if you want to explain it a little bit more, go ahead, Dawn.
Oh, okay. So Mars offers a consulting service for a fee, but Jeff?
I approve the fee for both town, Whitman and Hanson.
Yeah, it's cheap. Fairly nominal.
It's about $1,000 to do an assessment.
It's very...
Yeah. So it says right here, they offer a complete financial picture of your member towns. And the goal, really, it says, is why is this important for superintendent and school committees to fully understand the financial status of your member towns, to work with them to pass the school budget, consider overrides, and recognize the capacity to support future capital needs. So this consulting report that I believe they can turn around maybe in a month, fairly quickly, will give concrete data that's online already, but you know, your member town tax rate, free cash, stabilization, override capacity, your municipal budget trends by department, and then for the school district, it says it will offer details including your MLC, your minimum local contribution trends, your minimum local contribution as a percentage of your town's total new revenue, percent increases, target share trends, so a lot of information that will be helpful going forward to decide where our town wants to go, where the school budget fits in with that. This is fantastic.
Do you have any towns that have used that and have any samples of what it looks like or recommendations on, yeah, I mean, for $1,000, it seems like
It's the best ROI we're gonna get.
It says that sample reports are available upon request. I haven't requested them yet.
I'm just wondering who's used it and is the information really, for $1,000, it just seems like, how can you do it for that?
You've already
I
approved
think
it,
they'll
right?
come out and look at it, and they'll charge more for a presentation of that material.
Yeah.
So that's I think that's the catch.
Yeah, getting
is
numbers
They'll
is one
do
thing.
the numbers, they'll crunch the numbers because that's what they do in their association, the state association. But then to get it out and talk it in Jeff speak, we're gonna probably have to pay a little bit more of that.
Still worth it.
But
Yeah.
but it will, when we found that piece of it, if they're gonna gather that data for both communities and then be able to show that in appropriate, not in just fiscal '21, but looking at the next trends, 5 years ago to 5 years pro, they'll be able to do it in a better fashion than my folks will be able to do that.
I think even trends around the minimum local contribution, $1,000 in and of itself is worth it because that formula is a formula that's really difficult to try to get any information on.
Correct.
And I know we've had someone from
DESE
DESE come out and speak before at a school committee meeting. I think it's probably worth it even if we had someone come out and speak to us. But just having that data in front of us, in
Correct.
a numbers sense, I think would make a lot of sense.
I know previously we had talked about, and also with Fred, Novak, was that,
Tracy Novak.
about possibly having her come to this and if we, or,
You got her, you got Julie Kelly from from Mass Association of Regional Schools.
just somebody to come out and, obviously it's,
Sort of explain the numbers, because anyone can throw a report in front of you, but
right,
interpreting
it's
them
a,
maybe.
confusing topic. that-
Absolutely. So we can reach out, I think once this, again, it's the summertime, it's August, everybody seems to be out. So we're going to, the 2 consultants that do that, we're now on the list of consultants to get that turnaround time. And I sent the PO actually yesterday. So the PO, or not yesterday, it's there today. So we're gonna wait for that turnaround time, and as we dialogue, as the next meeting comes, or the meeting after that, people from DESE or people from Mars can come out and have that conversation with this committee. And like Mr. George said, the numbers are, the formulas are confusing. Until you see them on, I mean, you can be a very educated person and looking at the formula, and it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if you talk to different folks, they interpret the formulas differently, and that bottom line comes out. So what I had said to Dawn today, we spoke, I said, I just want to try to get this right. We have a shot to look at it and get people in, and to do it the right way, to make sure we can sustain over time and not just be grabbing piecemeal, you know?
Right. And that's my take on it, is we're not going to go back to 1991 or when we fully regionalize. We're going to move forward, and I think this is the chance to do it. Looking forward, let's get all the information and present it.
I think the other part, Randy, is if I'm one of 10 members here from the school committee too, also a Whitman resident, and on this committee, if I'm here tasked with discussing an override and how much, I think, it's prudent that we have the right numbers that we'll work with. I
Right,
can't
right.
advocate or endorse an override if I'm not sure, the numbers will work.
Okay,
That's what I'm
that's
trying to
huge.
say.
I mean, changing the way we are funding the school, or what we're required to fund the school, has a huge impact on what we're doing right here.
Right.
I mean, more than probably anything we can talk about.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean,
All right. Yeah. Moving on to the next topic. Benefits of bringing in a independent financial consultant. I personally think it's a plus. You know, we issue with Mars. My feeling is the more independent third-party eyes you can get on things, looking at things, is a plus. Previously, Mr. Lambiase and I had talked about something like this, so I will...
Yeah, so, I agree. I think it's imperative, or just it'd be great to have another set of eyes, much like what you're doing with the school funding. But to be able to come in here and look at it, do a look back and a look forward on the trends, and give us an idea with a financial snapshot of A, do we need an override? And B, if we do need an override, what do we need, and how would we allocate it based on the trends that we see and how we've been allocating things in the past? And even see, maybe there's some areas that we could tighten the belt that we're not doing. I spoke to the former finance director of Duxbury. He's got a great resume, great background. He's retired now and doing consulting work. He could put a report together for us within 4 weeks. It would be under $10,000. I don't know that we actually have $10,000 to spend. That's a question of our accountant and our town administrator if we're interested in going that route. But the report I asked him, because I explained what our situation was, and what this function of this committee is, and what we're looking for as far as deliverables go, and it would be, specifically, a lot of the things and a lot of the numbers I think you were going to get out of this previous report, and to sort of help us put that together, and at the end also give us some recommendations on how to going forward. The idea of it is not to look back and say, hey, you guys should have been doing this, you should have been doing that. The idea is just to say, this is where you are, this is what your trends have been, and this is where you're going. So, as Randy said, I think it's nice to have another set of eyes, an independent set of eyes, and somebody who's only focused on this. We've pretty much got a short span of time that we want to complete this in and get our head wrapped around it. And at the same time, Frank still has a town to run, and there's a budget series that we're coming up on that we have to deal with. So to additionally keep sort of shoveling stuff towards the administrator's office and say, hey, by the way, can you get all this done for us in a couple of weeks, is kind of, it's unfair. So, that's sort of where I was coming from with this, and I think it would be, at the end of the day, money well spent.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea. I don't know where we're going to pull the money from, but I think that there's an interest in general to having that done, more so than simply for this budget committee, but to have a practical third-party analysis of what's there. At this point, the only place I can think of where we would be able to come up with $10,000 that hasn't been appropriated would be as an unforeseen expense from the Finance Committee. It would be an expense that I would argue for.
I would certainly advocate for it, and I would also suggest that if we wanted to give anybody a level of comfort with it, this gentleman would be happy to come in here, and I don't know if we'd want to meet with this committee, or perhaps this committee meets with the Board of Selectmen and let the Selectmen.
That would be the more
appropriate
process.
And as I said, it would be, when I discussed it with them, the number was going to be less than 10,000, so it wouldn't be, my number to this committee and my recommendation would be try and find 10,000, but he was talking somewhere in the $8,000 range.
Right.
But as things, and my concern with it is only scope creep tends to happen whenever there's a committee involved. At the end of it, it would be, with the deliverables though, further recommendations
are always nice to have too, with, you know, how we are dealing with money, how we are dealing with budgets, and how we are, you know, sort of looking at these things.
So explain to me how
an
that's
internal
different
review.
from what Don?
Or the Collins report.
I think that that's a
yeah.
question that we would ask him.
8,000, 1,000?
Oh, I don't think you're getting the
That's
same
related
report.
solely to the schools.
Yeah.
No, she
Well,
said
but
it
you're
had
getting numbers, and this is a person who's gonna come and tell you
trends.
what to do with these numbers, and what I'm looking for overall here, as a deliverable, is here's, you know, here's our overall, this is what's going on with Tim's department, this is what's going on with that DPW department, this is what's
I
going on
didn't
with the school
realize it was
department,
that
these is where the
much
trends are
of a
going.
assessment.
And this is, you know, this sort of gonna be, you know, we're looking to say, individually, are all of these guys gonna run into this delta where we can't afford it, or we can't keep up with the expense? Is it only gonna happen in certain areas, and how do we appropriate that?
I think that the big difference, at least that I'm hearing, is with what's coming from Mars, is the trends are really related to school funding itself and the overall capacity of the towns to meet that requirement over the next few years. I think what we're talking about here really is some detail around the different departments, and are we missing anything? Are there additional trends that we're not foreseeing? You know, I'm
And-
assuming he can compare to what he's seen in other municipalities that maybe we're not thinking about at this point, and hopefully provide some feedback. What I'd want to see, in order to make a decision about whether I think it's worth us asking it, is just a list of deliverables.
Well,
Probably, right?
yeah, I think ultimately we ask for that, but I think the main deliverable at the end of this from him are number recommendations. That this is what you need, this is what you have to do, this is the money. So if he does come down and say, yeah, you know, you're going at the rate you're going, you are gonna need an override, and this is what you're gonna need, and I would recommend you allocate it in such a way. That's what I asked for, and that's, I don't
So
think.
they would be drilling into town
There's
spending,
our
revenue,
specific-
expenses.
Right.
Right.
Now, that being said, I do believe that, like, as we said, I think it would be nice, and I know he'll be happy to come and speak with us and answer any questions. But I think that is an excellent question. The first question that we have to ask him, and I'll obviously give my heads up on it, that, you know, we are doing this. How does this tie in with what I'm asking you to do? Because the first thing he asked me, and the first thing he said that would be needed would be a lot of numbers. And he did say, you know, most of this stuff I can get. It's helpful to have it provided, but most of this stuff is stuff that's online, that's accessible.
It's just gathering it.
It's a lot of work, it's a lot of time. And like I said, he thought 3 or 4 weeks he could have a report to us with all deliverables. So, but I do recommend we bring him in, talk to him, and if, you know, if there are other people that are, you know, anybody Frank wants to talk to, we would talk to them, but he does come with some good credentials, so.
Just, I didn't know, and piggybacking on what Mars does the MMA offer that service? Mass Municipal Association?
Actually, the DOR does, but it's a long, involved process to get on their list. And then
I hadn't heard of anything by the
Get them in
MMA, but.
I haven't, there are consultants who advertise with the MMA, but the MMA itself does not do that.
So that is something to think about, and that's obviously not this board's decision. I mean, when we're asking for funds, that's something that has to be taken to the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
I think we could vote to recommend that we'd like to see them do that.
I think at the end of the day, if we're gonna move forward to the taxpayers, our job at this group, my understanding is to evaluate if we need an override or not. Because there's a lot of question out there, is if we actually need one, what are we doing, you know, or what can we do to fix things? If we have 2 reports, 2 in-depth financial reports that are being done, and both those reports say, like, come out and say, yeah, you're gonna be $2 million short in a year from now or whatever, then we have our back that we need.
Right.
Not doing this, we're just throwing numbers around at each other saying, well, Well, by our numbers, yeah, we think we need one.
Well, we're putting a lot of, we're requesting everything to come just from the town in a very short amount of time and from the school department in a very short amount of time when I think we need somebody who, and a couple somebodies to be even better.
In less than 3 weeks, you ramp right back up again.
Get stuff going on.
There's also the value, what's the alliteration I'm doing now? The value evaluation. Having, this is as independent a group in terms of an analysis as I think we could put together, but it's still a group of people who are involved in the process. By bringing in someone who is independent of the process, you get a more objective assessment, and I think that's worth something.
I would hope that the data that's presented comes without a bias that any one of us may put into any analysis we do, consciously or unconsciously, right?
Right.
Hopefully, as a consultant, the data that he's able to put together is truly unbiased and would allow us to look at it. And for that reason alone, I think, I would definitely support it.
It's all perception.
I think that's a fantastic point. I think the more independent evaluation you can get, you're getting away from that. Of this preconceived notion as this guy's a school guy, this guy's a fire guy. No, this is somebody that's just going to come in, take a raw look at things, and give us his opinion.
Now, the chief mentioned 2 reports that we're talking about now, but we also have the Collins report that should be coming forward
Right.
when ready.
We'll
So that
have,
would be a third piece.
Well, which is going to be huge because
we'll have the budget model, which gives us a format and presentation, and we'll have the capital analysis, which gives us an outline. In fact, I just mentioned Randy. We met Thursday with Collins Center, and Friday they updated the pieces, so now I've got to put them together and prepare an outline of it and then bring them in to do an actual presentation. But I'm comfortable with what's been presented. I'm confident that if we put things together the way we should here, we will be able to address the capital needs without taking away from operating budgets to do it. And that's really the key element to this. So
All right, so
what we're looking at here is
So
an
the motion-
operating budget.
Will the motion be in line to request that the Board of Selectmen move forward with
that I could take,
you could bring back to the board?
bring back to the rest of the Board of Selectmen and discuss this to get their opinion on if we're going to move forward. So I will entertain
And
that
potentially a
motion.
vote from them so we can move forward.
Yes, we did. And then obviously, it will be a funding source issue, which still may be a hang-up.
Okay?
But I will entertain the motion.
I make the motion.
so second.
All those in favor?
It's unanimous.
Unanimous, okay. All right, moving on, Town Administrator's Report. Or we can call him the clerk here, I guess.
Yes. I've distributed the minutes. I don't expect everyone to sit here and read them right now, but if you would be prepared to vote on them at our next meeting, and look through them. Attribute is based on what I heard on the tape. I could be referring to the wrong person, so you might want to see if you're accurately referred to. Dawn was easy, the rest weren't. And then the other item is, and everybody here knows our town, Ken Lytle, sorry, Ken. Went back to the first day. Ken and I have been working on revenue forecasts based on what we know today. And some of these things were pretty interesting. We looked at growth, we looked at excess levy capacity numbers. We looked at the local receipts, which are surprisingly more across the board than you might think, and local aid. Our cherry sheet revenue went up, what, 70,000 this year? And I'm forecasting modest increases for the next few years. There's more stabilization, there's more stable payment in that over the last 4 years than there have been over the last 15, where it was a seesaw. Overlay is always a question. I talked with the assessor today. I am pretty certain we have probably 140,000 in excess overlay, but until they review it and vote to certify it as excess, it stays with the assessor. So these are right now best estimates or projections for increases. You'll notice I did add a line for excess levy capacity, because we do want to capture that in our budget each year. And there is a mechanism for actually voting to include it in the levy limit, but not the assessment. And I have to look at that a little more. That's an NIGR that
I
came
do
out
have a
last
question
year.
on that. That's really not what that's called on this sheet. It's called new growth adjustment, right?
No, it's not. It's not new growth adjustment.
Well, I
It
mean,
isn't.
I'm looking at, what I've downloaded off the website.
Yeah, but none of them would have shown the excess levy that we've had over the years.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to capture excess levy and add it in there. You can't capture 2020 excess levy and put it into the 2020 levy calculation.
No, not the levy calculation, the levy limit. In other words, when we have excess levy, you either capture it or it rolls back into the system. And there's two ways to capture it. You can spend it, or you can add it to the levy limit, not the levy. The levy limit is what we're allowed to assess.
Right.
The levy is what is actually appearing on your,
So the levy limit you have is from last year is the maximum that you can roll into the levy. You can't take
based on
forecasted.
estimates.
Based on estimates.
Based on estimates. Once the tax rate is set, we have the actuals.
Correct.
Property hasn't been valued yet. Hopefully they're out there now. I'm not confident when I say that, but hopefully they're out there now. Over the next couple of months, the Patriot Property people will be looking at all of the permits and estimating values for those permits.
Right.
And that will come back and allow the assessors to calculate new growth. The excess levy is, and I'm not, this is the problem, I can't see where on any of our reports it comes in other than on the classification sheet where everything is calculated. We've calculated all the money we voted to spend. We've calculated our estimated new growth. And then there's a number that comes in. It doesn't appear on any of the worksheets, but it appears on that final calculation.
Can I ask maybe a little bit differently, just to make sure I understand it, and I know Don, you looked at this as well, right? So we have a levy calculation, let's say we raise an appropriate right up to that number, 25 million. We find out through valuation that we got an additional 500,000 in levy capacity.
Correct.
We can do two things. We can hold a fall town meeting and we can raise and appropriate that 500,000.
Correct.
Or we can say, we don't need it, but at the beginning of the next fiscal year, we can calculate that 500,000 into our starting point.
No, you
No,
cannot.
you have to take action within the fiscal year
Correct.
to capture that money.
If it's above the levy limit, which anything like a debt exclusion would allow you to go over the levy limit. If our levy limit is 25 million and we set the levy at 25.2 million and we have an excess levy capacity of 250,000, that money's gone. We can't use it to calculate the levy for the next year.
And what I'm saying is there is a way to do that. The assessors can set an upper levy limit, but they can't spend the money. It then becomes part of the levy limit in the next fiscal year. And again, I mentioned
And I guess that's what I was getting at based on what I
that
read.
there's an IGR that I really, literally have not had the time to sit and go through and then go through with the assessor. But I believe there's a way to capture that limit so that it doesn't go away. When we set the final recap sheet, we'll have a levy, but we'll also have a higher levy limit because that number
I
can
understand
be
we can
captured.
capture it, I'm just saying the way you're describing it is dangerous, because that's not really what that money is. You're describing it as 2020 excess levy,
No,
but it's not what that is.
no, that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm showing you that we are estimating that there will be an excess levy, and as long as we voted to spend it, we've accessed it. The only danger in that is if we estimate a high excess levy and we don't have it,
Right.
then we have to come back and reduce budgets. So what I've estimated based on numbers is $350,000, which is slightly below the lowest average over the last 5 years, taking out that personal property increase, and a couple of thousand higher than the average from the last 11 years. And those were some low numbers. So when we look at this, we're doing what we did this year with our town meeting. We know that we believe there's going to be an additional amount of money available. So we're estimating that when we make appropriations to get to our levy limit.
And this is something I think you and I were hoping, Frank, that we could kind of streamline this process with the assessor going.
Tell him to turn it down. Tell him to turn it down a little bit.
We know you're out there, thank you. Tim, could you make them a little louder?
See you later.
So we can get a better handle on this.
Right.
And obviously, in previous meetings, we realized there was a little lapse with who we're using as far as the assessment, and these things do we are kind of hamstrung by minimal staff up there. Bob's only one person, Patriot Properties. So if we had excess people, yes, I think it would be moving a lot faster. But there's obviously ways we can work on getting those.
There are two challenges to our numbers. We are a June community, so we count our growth from July 1st to June 30th. Decision was made to do that back in '98. At the time, it sounded like a good idea because we were picking up 18 months of growth when we needed it. Didn't work that way. And because we're a June community and contract our work, we can't start that analysis until after July 1st. And that hamstrings us. If you were to go to Hanson, for example, the employees all go out and inspect and estimate the new growth. They don't rely on a third party to do it. I've asked our assessor about it, and we have, in her estimation, neither the staff nor the expertise to complete that process, which is why we rely on Patriot Properties. What we're asking them to do is to work a little faster so that we have time to digest the numbers that come back.
And just, I know there's a lot of things permitted right now. And just so people don't, can you just explain that, how things
Sure.
come on the rolls, Frank?
There's $49 million estimated in new buildings that we can identify right now. Not all of it's going to be complete by June 30th. And what happens is when somebody comes in to build a building, the inspector estimates a value and charges a permit fee. Where we get growth is he might estimate the cost of the building at $400,000. When it's complete and it's assessed, it might be set at $450 or $475. And that's an ongoing and constant process. But it all starts with the inspector taking a permit, sending it over to the assessor, then the assessor compiling those, building the base list, and then sending them out for valuation. So it's a
But just
time-consuming
as people
process.
see things going up, that doesn't necessarily mean the town is taking that money in right now.
That's right.
Okay.
We might see buildings start now, that won't hit the tax rolls for 2 years.
Right, no, but you're gonna see a pretty good bump to your revenue for each one of those upfront for building permit fees that are.
Right, so those are
Construction
revenues that are in the
$2,000,
local
$3,000,
receipts.
local
So,
receipts, yeah.
just so I can understand a little bit more on the new growth. So when the permit is taken out for $49 million, like you said, when that permit date is when it actually goes into our new growth numbers?
No,
No, when it's completed.
not until it's complete.
Correct, okay. So those numbers they don't get into our new growth calculation until the final sign off and it's livable. And then whatever that date is what you.
That's correct. And the estimated numbers are based on what the assessor and the
Right.
building inspector think will be added. And those, you're probably always going to want to look conservatively at that. You never want to overestimate new growth, because that brings a whole handful of problems with it. When you do your recap sheet and you have less money than you thought. The other thing is snow and ice. At the bottom of the sheet, we have the subtractions, the overlay, and snow and ice. The DPW has requested this year to increase the budget for snow and ice to 200. We have been carrying 120 for the last 19 years. And there were 2 years where it was less than that. The problem is, by using that smaller number, we're always in the hole by 200,000 or more. So what we've done is, we know the DPW is asking for 200. We also identify that the average is something in excess of 300. So we're including an estimate deficit of $100,000 in our numbers in order to ensure that we're not so far off that we're playing catch-up each year. Because every year when we start our budget, we start subtracting numbers.
I know we're allowed to deficit spend snow and ice removal. Is there any reason why the DPW wouldn't just ask us for the full 320 or 30,000?
Yes, if you set a budget for snow and ice and you exceed that budget and deficit spend, you make it up on the recap sheet. If you then decide, hey, I'm going to lower that because we don't need it anymore, so you lower it to 200, and the next year you spend in excess of that, you're barred from deficit spending beyond the adjusted budget. It's a great hammer the state has to keep you from playing with that.
So basically, you always want to come in under.
Yes.
You always want to come in under.
Yeah.
Because you can't give it back.
You never want to reduce it once you've got it up there unless you're convinced.
But what
But you
about
have to
going-
go 2 years before you can deficit.
What about going the other way and increasing that actual line item in Article 2 to $300-something thousand? Is there any reason why we wouldn't want to do that?
Only that it may cause a strain on the amount of money available for your budget? Because
So if we were a committee potentially looking at an override, would that be a good time to?
could be.
Well, what happens if you don't spend it?
It becomes surplus funds. It goes into free cash. The city of Brockton, because of the low snowfall, Mayor Carpenter redirected $500,000 to the schools from the snow and ice budget
Well,
because it was a drop in the bucket for what they needed.
good with,
Yeah.
all right, well, I think that kind of segues into what I kind of really wanted to hit on here, like a defined mission statement of this group. Something like that, I think, is out of our scope. I think that that's a finance committee issue. And I really want to stay on track with this is a override evaluation committee. You know, but we still have the FinCom, Board of Selectmen. Let's just stay focused. I don't know what everyone's feeling is. I don't know if we have to drag department heads in and you know, barring some really exigent circumstance with the budget. I'd like to try and avoid that for just time constraints if we are trying to get this thing done quickly. I think that
I think
could...
the only discussion that we had about that was if you have a department that, if this committee decides that it's our recommendation to the town move forward with an override, what's making those departments, I think you probably, like I said, at best last meeting, is what don't you have? Like, what does Abington and Hanson, East Bridgewater, and Rockland all have that our school district doesn't? Or that our police department doesn't, or our DPW doesn't, and what makes that whole? And when you get to that point, I think is when we may want to look at that. But
Right, but I would say, I think if we can get all the budgets, we get these, you know, third-party looks, that's quite a bit to see.
exactly.
I think, Randy, what you're saying is, I don't think we need to have department heads in to go through the minutia and really kind of grill what's
Right.
going on, but certainly I think when it comes to, all right, we feel like we're, you know, let's say we get to a point where we get the third-party reports, we kind of have an idea of what we really need to make this community whole in terms of dollars. I think then a discussion with the department heads about, you know, what are we really recommending? What's missing? What do you get out of this? What's the value? I think becomes really important,
Right.
both from a recommendation, and from a marketing standpoint as we go forward.
But
right?
don't we
I
have to
think that's-
recommend where that money's gonna get spent?
Well, I think the first thing is, I think we need to actually see what a number is going to be
Right,
before
right.
we start
I agree.
that.
I agree. I don't think there's a lot of value in calling people in to try to come up with a number. I think it becomes a conversation.
After,
Kind of
right.
a final, in my mind, it becomes a final conversation and whatever, I'll throw it. If it's $2 million and I say, I want to feel good about that $2 million, I want to understand what the department heads are thinking.
Right.
Right? To me, that's where the value is there.
I mean, and I'm not saying not to question things, I think that can come in the venue that's a little bit easier to deal with through an email to the department heads, simple requests, and we compile it like that.
Initially, the budget speaks for itself. When we see the numbers, we can quickly identify where the concerns are. I've asked each budget department to submit a brief narrative of what the budget represents and what their needs are, and why they're asking for what they're asking for. Because most of these budgets are going to reflect increases.
Right. So I guess what would be, what everyone would agree with is actually the mission of this committee, just an evaluation of budgets to see if this town,
I think what Timmy said about 25 minutes ago was this committee's charge is to evaluate everything to see if the town actually needs an override or not.
Right.
And instead of...
if so.
And if
If
so,
so.
make a recommendation on that.
This is what the number is.
And from what time period does it sustain us?
Right.
Yeah.
3 years?
Well,
That's the
I think
whole
at
purpose
minimum,
of-
we're looking at 5 years here. And if we, you know, it may take us that long to do it again. So, but really, realistically, I think we have to look at it for 5 years. But I think the deliverable at the end of it, like we said, is a report to the selectmen and probably the finance committee from this committee stating this is what we found and this is what we recommend. And those recommendations should be dollar amounts, budget amounts, and maybe even some best practices going forward that we can follow or adhere to or whatever.
And is that what everyone would agree with as far as benchmarks? All right. Any immediate tasks?
The Board of Selectmen to approve $10,000 to
Plus or minus.
get this guy going.
I'll work on that
When's the next meeting?
tomorrow
We
night.
can we
Oh.
get, we probably can get on the agenda that fast.
I believe that
We
there-
can ask for an amendment to the agenda
Well, there
tomorrow.
is-
You have a
All
report
of it.
for
Put a
this
public
meeting.
I
forum,
do have a-
Randy's on.
put a public forum.
Public forum.
present.
I am on it for the committees. Yeah.
Okay. You got it taken care of.
I kind of crossed my fingers it would get through this stuff. All right, so that'll be that. We'll see if that happens.
What is the next finance committee meeting if they need to approve?
There's none scheduled currently.
Right.
We meet on a moment's notice.
Oh, several
meet all year
minutes.
long, it's pretty much what we're at now.
All
We
right.
don't have one scheduled now, do you, Dave?
We do not, no.
Summer hiatus, right?
Summer break.
Summer break.
One thing I did want to toss out, I don't know how in favor of it I am, is developing smaller working groups. I don't know if it's necessary.
At this point, it doesn't seem like we have anything to work on. We need to get some numbers in and get some of those reports back, but at that point,
I mean, I think everyone, as far as school issues, we have that, we have,
So our goal would be to get information from Mars on both the evaluation of Whitman and Hanson, and then I'll be working with the school committee too, and the regional school agreement committee to get some more information regarding the funding piece, so that's clearer, because that might change how this committee moves forward.
well, I think that's a key piece.
I mean, I agree. And I don't want to throw out different things here, and that's why I think what Scott said about working groups, if I don't have information to give you right now, that would serve any purpose.
All right.
I think it'd also be important, just sort of, not that it's a working group, but the other thing that we need someone directed at, whether it's Frank or accountant or whatever, is that
I think it's
the levy capacity issue. And recapturing that, exactly what the formula and what the way of doing it is. Maybe Don wants to do it.
I have a question.
Yeah, I think she volunteered. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, I'm trying to get chairman's attention for a question there.
I'm sorry.
No. In regards to Patriot Properties though, I did have a question, because it is good practice if it's cost effective for a third party, makes sense, versus how Hanson does it with employees on the payroll. So my question really is around a fall town meeting. And does it make sense to schedule one in Whitman to best capture that levy as Hanson does? Or is the mechanism of putting excess levy capacity on the budget, I think.
Well, I think that does fall into, we need to,
Yeah. The quick history on why. We stopped having special town meetings because it became a second opportunity for everybody to rebuild their budgets. So we took the position, we're going to have one meeting a year. You'll set your budget. We'll handle all of the operational needs and the special within the annual. Now we're doing something different. We're coming up with a defined capital plan. And I think, and haven't hit that point yet, where still going over the numbers, but it may make sense to have a general budget meeting in the spring and the capital meeting in the fall.
Where you know what that excess money is.
Where you know where all your numbers are, but the general, and it all comes together in pieces. The Collins Center is estimating that we could direct 4% of our levy into debt service. And if we do that, by managing the priorities, we can start a rolling project system. As debt comes off, debt goes on. These projects are retired, these projects come in. There are some that are recurring. I'm sure the fire chief will be relieved to hear that we've identified the fire's capital needs consistent with the fire's ambulance fund. Although you're not off the hook, we're still looking for money from it. So it would, if we can put all the numbers together on a regular basis, then that would be your town meeting would consist of voting a budget and voting, part of that budget would be the payment of debt. Within the levy, you don't have to have an election, you simply have to have town meeting approve it. That would allow fall planning for those projects that couldn't make the cut initially. But more importantly, it's our opportunity to take excess funds and bank them, put them in the capital stabilization account, start funding the school stabilization, start funding the technology stabilization. Those are all big ticket items, and when we spend money, we spend a lot. So it makes sense to take that excess levy and utilize it, put it where it's needed, so that we know sticker shock. I think you have a question from the gallery.
Oh, gallery.
Back, it was what, last April sometime, when you knew the name of the attorney of the day from the Division of Local Service, Ken something or other. Wasn't, I can't remember his last name.
Yeah, that's not malign, and forget that last.
On the DOR website, there's a series of videos about Proposition 2.5 and levy limits. And I want to say it's video number 9 that talks about capturing the excess levy capacity and how you can just add it onto your worksheet. I know Ken and I probably spent, what, 12, 15 hours on the phone?
At least.
You know, going over and over and over that.
You don't have caller ID?
And you were fantastic. And to the best we could determine, it had already been added to the base number automatically by DOR.
In some cases.
Okay.
In some cases.
Yeah, so that's, you know, that's just another component, but maybe another source of information are those videos.
So, I mean, I do think these are the types of discussions that we should have as they come to light. And,
Right.
you know, if we can think of best practices around them. I mean, I agree with Dawn, both in my professional life and, you know, a third party's a great and cost-effective best practice in many cases. I think if we feel like we're not getting the answers, or if we feel like Patriot Properties can't meet our needs as a town, I don't know that I want to dive deep into that, but maybe a recommendation from this group is, you know, we need to look at it more closely, right? I think those are the type of things that are going to come out of some of these discussions. I don't know that we're in a place where we can, you know, really make a decision or dive super deep into that process, but
I think when it did get finally brought up at the selectmen's meeting, I think that was eye-opening to everyone at that time. I'm hoping to see a change with them, that maybe we just, they needed, you know, the acknowledgement.
Direction.
We're watching this a lot closer, and we need it done.
The Board of
expedited.
Assessors is the elected board that oversees the assessment and basically the levy process. So they know my concerns, and I hope they're willing to address it in a timely way. But it is their responsibility to do these things. They now know the havoc it's been causing us in terms of not having numbers until the night we do our
Hanson hasn't been real great with their excess levy capacity management either. Abington has. What is Abington doing to get so close to their levy calculations that, you know, Whitman isn't? Rockland's doing a really good job at it as well. Their excess levy capacity over the last 5 or 6 years has been very close. But Hanson and Whitman have not been.
You'll notice a corresponding increase in free cash the year following that, because one of the techniques that's used, and I don't think we should do it, I know it's done, but I don't think we should do it, is to understate your local receipts or understate your what are the other numbers that go in there?
New growth. Just being
New
ultra
growth.
conservative.
And then overstate your abatement account, your allowance for abatements. All of those things have the effect of increasing the tax levy, but not the spending. On paper, you're spending, but then that money ends up either in free cash or in an account that has to be voted out. I had this discussion with the DOR when they were in last spring, and you were a part of that, right? Yeah. And it just, you know, if you're going to ask people for stuff, I think you have to be upfront with what your needs are and how you identify them. The challenge for me was when somebody comes in the end of October and hands us a document for the first time that says, you have $700,000 in excess levy. Do you want to use it? It's too late. If I don't set the tax rate, if we don't get those tax bills out on time, we can't do a quarterly billing, and we have to wait until the spring. And that creates a different kind of financial hardship for us.
Didn't you change it to twice a year now, though? Or is it?
No, we're still quarterly.
She's just mailing them?
Yeah.
Right.
So what she's doing is she's mailing 2 bills.
Right.
But if you don't set your tax rate in time to get approved by the DOR in November, then you can't send your bills out in December. And if you can't bill in December, you then have to carry that quarter forward to April 1st. And that means the town has to borrow roughly $7, $8, $9 million to meet it, $7 million
Yeah, we don't want that to happen.
to meet its operating expenses. So at that point, trying to get a town meeting set up between Thanksgiving and Christmas, good luck.
All right.
The question you just brought up, town meeting. What's our drop dead timeline to get a fall town meeting in? You know, so
Well, that's where I was going with. I had skipped over it, and I just wanted to, that's something we really have to discuss, because we are, I mean, we're talking 4 weeks from ours, we're talking trying to get this approved, and then maybe 4 weeks for this. It's 6 weeks.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to do all of this in October.
No. So I think that needs to be very clear, and it may be a month after, maybe 3 months after.
Okay.
I think we need to put the right amount of time in, get all the information.
You know, other than knowing what we're going into the budgeting season with, right, certainly from the town of Whitman's perspective, you know, there's no reason why it can't even go to the spring, right? But though I think there's nothing that locks us into October, there's nothing that locks us into November, right? I mean, we could call.
That's correct. The
for a
budget's set for
special
2020.
town meeting at any point in time,
Right.
right? So we could have a January or February one if we wanted to.
The only thing is, we're still under an old agreement, regional agreement, and if the funding sources were to change, a new agreement has to be passed before December 31st of 2019 for fiscal '21. Okay, so I just put that on the table.
Well, I don't want to get into a huge debate about it, but yes and no, right? So there's the statutory method,
Right.
which is actually the default method that we should be following. I mean, the state really sets it up that way. And there's the alternative method, which we have been following, though I would argue there's some procedural things that really should have been done in order for us to follow that method that haven't been done. Now that, again, not going backwards, now that we know about them, we can look at them. But regardless of whether or not the regional agreement says by enrollment or not, the statutory method superseded any regional agreement at that point in 2007. And if Whitman was to reject the budget, right, passed under an alternative method at town meeting, that's it, it's over. You have to go back and you have to assess us via the statutory method. The state has set it up that way, really not for a two-district regional school district, but 3 or 4 towns, right? If you have one town that is significantly poorer than the other 2 or 3 towns, they've set it up so that one town can put the kibosh on any alternative funding method. And so that still holds true here. I mean, I think regardless of what the regional agreement says,
Well, I also think this
the way to look
is
at
a discussion for the school committee too.
Correct, and that's the only reason I was asking about is a timeline for town meeting.
Right.
You know, just
Yeah.
to make sure that if there is something that says it has to be passed, because right now, the agreement is in our attorney's hands. So, and he's going back and forth on different things. So it is absolutely to the school committee, but for this, for my own purpose, at what point, when can Frank call a town meeting and how many days ahead of time? So if it did have to happen, how many
Well,
days ahead of time?
the selectmen have to call, there has to be a 2-week lead time
Okay.
between when a vote is taken to call for a town meeting and it's held.
Okay.
So, and that's a vote of the Board of Selectmen. A majority of the board would call for a town meeting and set a date, and we notify the clerk. The tricky part gets is if we're talking a ballot question, which we are. Now we need at least 35 days.
But you also need, I mean,
But
if
your
we're
issue
talking
would be
numbers, we
solved
need.
just at the town
We
meeting.
need time to,
Time,
yeah.
It's not a ballot. so-
Right.
I would hate to see us wait until the middle of winter, early spring, because it's gonna throw a monkey wrench in what these guys are doing.
Can't decide anything till the numbers come in.
Right.
So, I mean, I would say we're at least November, mid-November, just so we get things set. I think October 1st, you know, that first or second week is not feasible.
I mean, the FinCom's hands would be completely tied.
Right,
Just
well,
waiting to see
and
what the
that's what
outcome of everything was.
I don't want people out there saying they said October 1st and we didn't hit that date. But my goal is we get this wrapped up and we go into this next budget cycle knowing exactly where we stand. So,
Very late Thanksgiving this year, which works to our benefit.
right.
Oh, that's right.
Well, and I think you just established the 35-day timeline. If someone were to say you said October 1st, well, the end of August would be 35 days till October 1st, so we're not there.
Right.
We're not there.
We're not there. And this is assuming, I mean, I think we've made some progress tonight.
Yeah, we have a plan.
We have a plan. Hopefully everything, you know, works out the way we want it to, and we have some dates. Speaking of dates, let's set the next
One
meeting.
quick question.
Oh, yep.
God forbid you ever wanted to have a special town meeting with the only thing on it to be to act on the agreement, and also kitty corner that into an informational meeting as to what information and where the committee stands for public information at the same time. That
Right.
might not be the worst in the world either.
Yeah, and as far,
Food for thought.
definitely, I don't think that the hurdle of the regional agreement shouldn't be a hurdle when that all gets,
It's really a simple process. We're going to be holding, hopefully, public informational meetings. To Fred's point, if the board wished to act on something that was less than $25,000, we're not tied to a quorum. So it is possible to do what Fred's suggesting. I don't know if it's in the spirit of full disclosure and information to everybody, but at some point in time, we're going to be reaching out to the public and saying, we have news for you. And the people that turn up hear it.
Right.
And that's the challenge. It's to get people interested enough to come out and listen. So it could be a town meeting with a with an article and then a format for discussion.
All right. So, dates.
August.
19th. That give you time to get the selectmen and then have that gentleman come in and,
Well, if he needs 3 to 4 weeks turnaround, right?
Well, I think, would we want to, if this gets approved, do you want to have him come in and would he come in?
When are your 2 selectmen meetings for August? Or are you only having one?
We meet tomorrow.
We're scheduled tomorrow. There can be another meeting scheduled.
Because I'm assuming the selectmen will want to meet with him. And maybe we just make that a joint meeting with this committee? So we can all, if anybody has questions of him, or actually, I guess it could just be a selectmen meeting, and if we want to attend. But he's not going to be there. I doubt if I could get him there tomorrow night.
No. I mean, do you think the entire Board of Selectmen would want to question this gentleman, or
Probably not.
feel confident that you and I?
Yeah, I
So
think
I
the
think
board
just
would be
getting him
amenable
to,
to
All
it.
right.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, the 19th would probably be fine. Unless you intend to meet before that.
I mean, barring
19th is sure I can go.
19th.
Yeah,
19th work over.
I can't do the
I'll be here, but I'll
19th.
send you my questions.
All
I
right.
can't do the 19th, but there's no reason Lisa can't be here.
26th.
Yep.
I'll be back.
That works.
That might give you.
Actually, I won't be back on 26th, but that's all right.
All right.
I'll be back at like 11 at night, so.
The meeting will be really just to talk to this gentleman, right? I mean,
And-
there's not going to be any other agenda items.
Wait, is it 5 o'clock we talking again?
Yes.
Sorry, John.
Yeah. Would that work?
Okay.
Well, there may be other agenda items. I mean, hopefully,
Okay, tentatively for
some other things come up, and I would like to see maybe some more budget stuff come in at that point.
Yep.
That we could have a little
I
bit.
think obviously
to
it'd be
do a little
important
more
to let
leaning.
me know. So if the selectmen do sign on to this, if you can actually fund it before I drag them down here. I mean, if there's a potential for funding it, we'll drag them down and we can discuss it. But if you have nothing in your overlay surplus, can you pull money out of there?
That'd probably be more for the assessors than for me.
Yeah, and that needs a town meeting vote. I'm trying to think of what doesn't.
what the bad word reserve fund?
How about just free cash?
Nope, town meeting. A lot of budgets are interested in this, Tim. What's your expense account looking?
Why don't we save that conversation for
Well, these gentlemen can figure it out, let me know.
Selectmen will figure it out.
hopefully in the next.
Figure out a line item transfer.
Yes.
20% of FinCom's emergency money.
Reserve fund.
It's been done. It's been done before and earlier. One might
All right.
argue that.
So
keeping
the
it low
26th, August 26th, 5 o'clock. Also, if anyone does have any items they want to see on the agenda for that meeting, could you send them to me by the 20th? Yeah, the 20th, please. Good?
Just, more information to be presented to this board. I think some information that would be good from the accountant would be monies turned back from line items.
Yeah, we're actually working on that for an actual for 2019.
Okay.
And I think, obviously, with the budget just getting wrapped up, we're a little bit behind the eight ball with our actual, so not to anyone's fault here, so hopefully by the 26th, we actually... All right.
Welcome to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor?
Adjourned at 6:17.